Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Part 1. Crash Landing. The relentless heat of twin suns bore down on Luke Kowalski as he stumbled through the dense alien foliage of Iridia 7. His once pristine pilot's uniform hung in tatters, barely clinging to his sweat-soaked body. 3 days had passed since he'd last tasted food or water, and the effects of dehydration were taking their toll. His cracked lips bled, stinging with each labored breath, while a myriad of scratches crisscrossed his skin, souvenirs from the unforgiving jungle that had surrounded him. Luke's mind drifted hazily between consciousness and delirium, his thoughts a jumbled mess of memories and survival instincts. The crash of his ship, the Sirius, played on repeat in his mind's eye, a cacophony of screeching metal and warning sirens that had heralded his unexpected arrival on this alien world. Now all that remained of his former life was the tattered uniform on his back and an emergency beacon that hung uselessly at his side, its distress signal lost in the vast emptiness of space. As he trudged onward, massive ferns unfurled before him, their fronds seeming to reach out and tangle around his legs. Roots, gnarled and treacherous, snaked across the forest floor, threatening to trip him with each unsteady step. Overhead, colossal mushroom-like trees towered impossibly high, their caps glowing with an otherworldly bioluminescence that cast eerie, shifting shadows across the jungle floor. The sound of running water tantalized Luke's senses, echoing from somewhere in the depths below. His parched throat constricted painfully at the thought of cool, life-giving liquid, but his weakened body betrayed him. He was simply too exhausted to navigate the treacherous terrain in search of its source. Yet despite his dire circumstances, a prickling sensation at the base of his skull told Luke that dehydration and starvation were not his only concerns. Every time he paused to catch his breath or survey his surroundings, a subtle disturbance in the ambient sounds of the jungle caught his attention. The faint rustle of leaves, the almost imperceptible sound of careful footsteps, signs that he was not alone in this alien wilderness. Someone or something was stalking him. The realization sent a surge of adrenaline through Luke's system, momentarily sharpening his dull senses. He had been a pilot, yes, but his training had covered more than just flying spacecraft. Survival skills, including evasion and hand-to-hand combat, had been drilled into him during his time in the Earth Space Force. Now those lessons bubbled to the surface of his consciousness, mixing with the raw instinct for survival that had kept him going these past days. Luke's mind raced, formulating a plan. He needed to confirm his suspicions, and, if possible, turn the tables on his mysterious pursuer. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for what he was about to do. In a carefully orchestrated move, Luke allowed his legs to give way beneath him. He collapsed to the ground, his body going limp as he fell face first into the soft alien grass. The impact knocked what little air remained from his lungs, but he forced himself to remain still, to play the part of the unconscious prey. Silence descended upon the jungle, broken only by the distant calls of unseen creatures and the gentle rustling of leaves in the warm breeze. Luke's heart thundered in his chest, but he willed his breathing to slow, to become shallow and even. He strained his ears, listening intently for any sign of approach. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours, as Luke lay motionless on the jungle floor. The damp earth beneath him seeped into his clothes, and he fought the urge to shiver. Just as he began to wonder if he had imagined the whole thing, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of cautious footsteps drawing near. His pursuer was taking the bait. Luke's muscles tensed imperceptibly as he prepared himself for action. The footsteps grew closer, hesitant but steady. He could sense a presence looming over him, could almost feel the scrutiny of eyes upon his prone form. His every instinct screamed at him to move, to defend himself, but he held fast to his ruse for a moment longer. When he felt the presence was close enough, Luke sprung into action with a surge of desperate strength. His eyes snapped open as he twisted his body, one hand shooting out to grasp the ankle of his stalker. In the same fluid motion, he swept his leg out, catching his opponent off guard and sending them crashing to the ground. Luke wasted no time. He scrambled atop the fallen figure, straddling their midsection as his hands sought purchase on their wrists. It was only then, as he successfully pinned his pursuer to the jungle floor, that he got his first clear look at who or what had been following him. The Huntress. Beneath him lay a woman, but unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin was a striking shade of blue, reminiscent of the deepest oceans of Earth. Long, silvery hair fanned out around her head like a halo, tangled with leaves and twigs from their brief struggle. But it was her eyes that truly captured Luke's attention, large, almond-shaped, and glowing with an intense amber light that seemed to pierce right through him. The alien woman let out a sharp, melodic cry of surprise and anger as Luke held her firmly in place, her body wriggling beneath him, powerful muscles tensing as she tried to break free from his grasp. But Luke, running on pure adrenaline and the desperate need for answers, held fast. "You've been following me," he exclaimed, his voice hoarse from days of disuse. His eyes bore into hers, searching for confirmation, for some hint of her intention. The woman's struggles intensified for a moment before she spat out a response in perfect, albeit accented English. "Let me go, human," she hissed, her amber eyes flashing with a mixture of fury. And was that respect? A smirk tugged at the corner of Luke's cracked lips. Despite his exhaustion, despite the precariousness of his situation, he couldn't help but feel a spark of triumph. "You stalked me for a week," he said, his voice gaining strength, "and now you want to give up so easily." At his words, the woman's struggles ceased abruptly. Her body went still beneath him, and Luke watched as her expression shifted. The anger in her eyes didn't disappear entirely, but it was joined by something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or grudging admiration. Her breathing slowed, and then, to Luke's surprise, her lips curved into a strange, almost predatory smile. "Fine," she conceded, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "You're smarter than I thought." Sensing a shift in the dynamic between them, Luke cautiously released his hold on her wrists. He remained alert, ready to defend himself if this proved to be a ruse. But the woman made no move to attack. Instead, she propped herself up on her elbows, studying him with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see right through to his very soul. "I am Xena," she announced, her chin lifting proudly. "Huntress and guardian of these lands." Luke's mind reeled at the implications of her words. A huntress. A guardian. He had crashed on a planet that was not only inhabited but had its own complex society. The realization both thrilled and terrified him. "Luke," he responded, his voice carrying a hint of weariness. "Pilot from Earth." As the initial tension of their encounter began to dissipate, Luke became acutely aware of his physical state. The burst of adrenaline that had fueled his actions was fading rapidly, leaving him lightheaded and weak. He swayed slightly, fighting to maintain his balance. Xena's eyes narrowed, taking in his condition with a hunter's precision. "You're in no state for further conflict, Earth pilot," she observed, her tone neutral. "Come, there is water nearby." Luke hesitated, unsure if he could trust this alien woman who had been stalking him for days, but the promise of water was too tempting to ignore, and he knew he had little choice. With a nod, he allowed Xena to help him to his feet. As they made their way through the dense undergrowth, Luke's mind buzzed with questions. Why had she been following him? What were her intentions? And how was it that she spoke English? But exhaustion and thirst overgrew his curiosity, and he focused on putting one foot in front of the other, following Xena's sure-footed steps. They emerged from the thick foliage into a small clearing dominated by a cascading waterfall. The sight of crystal-clear water tumbling over moss-covered rocks into a deep, inviting pool was almost too much for Luke to bear. Without thinking, he stumbled forward, dropping to his knees at the water's edge. "Careful," Xena's voice cut through his desperation. "Drink slowly, or you'll make yourself sick." Heeding her warning, Luke cupped his hands and brought the cool water to his lips. The first sip was paradise, soothing his parched throat and bringing instant relief. He forced himself to drink slowly, savoring each mouthful as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. As he quenched his thirst, Luke became aware of Xena moving around the clearing. She seemed to be gathering various plants, examining them closely before tucking some into a pouch at her waist. When she approached him again, she held out a large leaf filled with what looked like berries. "Eat," she commanded. "They're safe for your kind. They will help restore your strength." Luke eyed the offerings warily, but his growling stomach overrode any lingering suspicion. He popped a berry into his mouth, surprised by the burst of sweet tart flavor. As he ate, he felt some of his strength returning, the fog of exhaustion lifting slightly from his mind. Xena settled herself on a nearby rock, her posture alert despite her relaxed demeanor. "I needed to understand you," she explained, her amber eyes never leaving his face, "to determine if you were a threat to my people, to our way of life." Luke's brow furrowed. "A threat? I'm just a pilot who crashed on your planet. I've been trying to survive. Nothing more." A small smile played at the corners of Xena's mouth. "Perhaps, but you are not the first outsider to come to Viridia 7, Luke of Earth. And not all who have come before you had peaceful intentions." The implications of her words hung heavy in the air between them. Luke's mind raced, trying to process this new information. Had there been other human visitors to this planet, or perhaps other alien races? The possibilities were both exciting and terrifying. "I assure you," Luke said earnestly, "I mean no harm to you or your people. I'm just lost, trying to find a way home." Xena regarded him silently for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Luke's surprise, she nodded. "I believe you," she said softly. "Your actions, your struggle to survive, they speak of a man seeking only to live, not to conquer." Relief washed over Luke, and he felt some of the tension leave his body. "So what happens now?" he asked hesitantly. Xena's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "Now, Luke of Earth, we talk. You have much to tell me about your world, and I have much to show you about mine." Part 3. Cultural Exchange. In the days that followed, Luke and Xena fell into an unexpected rhythm. As Luke regained his strength, they traveled through the lush jungles of Viridia 7, with Xena showing him how to find food and water, how to navigate the sometimes treacherous terrain, and how to avoid the planet's more dangerous flora and fauna. In return, Luke shared stories of Earth and humanity's ventures into space. He found himself painting vivid pictures with his words, describing towering skyscrapers that seemed to touch the clouds, vehicles that moved without animal power, and ships that could cross the vast distances between stars faster than the speed of light. One evening, as they sat beside a small fire in a secluded glade, Luke attempted to explain the concept of the internet and global communication to an increasingly fascinated Xena. "So you're saying," she began, her brow furrowed in concentration, "that your people can instantly share thoughts and images across your entire world using these satellites?" Luke nodded, a smile playing at his lips. "More or less. We call it the internet. It's a vast network that connects computers all over the globe. People can access information, communicate with each other, even conduct business, all in the blink of an eye." Xena's amber eyes widened with wonder. "And these computers, they are like the one in your ship, the talking box that guided your flight?" "Similar, yes, but often much smaller. Some are no bigger than my hand," Luke explained, holding up his palm for reference. "Almost everyone carries one with them. We call them smartphones." "Smartphones," Xena repeated the unfamiliar word slowly. "Because they are intelligent devices for speaking across distances." Luke chuckled. "That's part of it, yes. But they do so much more. They can capture images, play music, help navigate unknown territories. In many ways, they're like having all of human knowledge in your pocket." Xena fell silent for a moment, her gaze distant as she processed this information. When she spoke again, Her voice was tinged with a mixture of awe and concern. "Your people must be very wise to have created such marvels." Luke's smile faltered slightly. "We've made great technological advancements, it's true. But wisdom, that's another matter entirely." Xena's eyes sharpened, picking up on the change in his tone. "What do you mean?" Luke sighed, poking at the fire with a stick as he gathered his thoughts. "Technology has brought us many benefits, but it's also created new problems. And despite all our advancements, we still struggle with the same basic issues that have plagued humanity for millennia." "Such as?" Xena prodded gently. "War," Luke said softly, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Poverty, inequality, environmental destruction. We have the power to communicate instantly across the globe, to travel between stars, and yet you cannot live in peace." Xena finished for him, her voice filled with understanding. Luke nodded, meeting her gaze. "If you have so much technology," she asked, her tone genuinely curious, "why can't you just live in peace?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Luke sighed deeply, his eyes reflecting the weight of human history. "Humans are always divided," he explained, his voice tinged with a mixture of resignation and frustration. "There are those who want to create, to explore, to better our world and our understanding of the universe. But there are also those who see our technological advancements as tools for conquest, for exerting power over others." Xena listened intently, her amber eyes never leaving Luke's face. "It seems," she said slowly, "that your people's great power comes with equally great challenges." Luke nodded, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "You have no idea. Sometimes I wonder if we were ready for the responsibility that comes with our technological advancements. We've unlocked the secrets of the atom, harnessed the power of the stars, and yet we still fight over resources, over ideology, over land." "Land?" Xena's brow furrowed. "But surely, with the ability to travel between worlds, land would no longer be a source of conflict." Luke let out a humorless chuckle. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it seems that no matter how far we go, some humans always want more. More land, more resources, more power. It's exhausting, really." A comfortable silence fell between them as they both stared into the flickering flames. Luke found himself appreciating Xena's ability to listen without judgment, to ask questions that made him reflect on his own world in ways he hadn't before. "Your world," Xena began after a while, her voice soft and thoughtful. "It sounds both wondrous and terrifying. So much potential, and yet we keep getting in our own way." Luke finished for her. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of his words. "Don't get me wrong. Earth it's home. It's beautiful and diverse and full of good people trying to make a difference. But sometimes from out here in the stars, it all seems so small." "Small?" Xena offered. Luke nodded. "Small, yes, and perhaps a bit absurd. Here I am, light years from home, talking to a blue-skinned huntress on a planet I never knew existed. It puts things in perspective, you know." Xena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps that is the wisdom your people need, the perspective of the stars." Luke smiled softly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we all need to step back sometimes, to see the bigger picture." Part 4. Conflict arises. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a distant rumble that shook the very ground beneath them. Luke tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer possessed. Xena, however, sprang to her feet with the fluid grace of a predator, her amber eyes scanning the darkening sky. "What is it?" Luke asked, rising to stand beside her. Xena's expression hardened, her body coiled with tension. "Warships," she muttered, gripping her spear tightly. "My brother has come." Luke frowned, confusion and concern battling for dominance in his mind. "Your brother?" Xena's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where the faint outline of massive vessels could be seen descending through the atmosphere. "Tariq," she explained, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. "He wants my father's legacy, the rule over our lands. But he sees me as an obstacle." The implications of her words hit Luke like a physical blow. All this time, as he had been sharing stories of Earth's struggles with power and conflict, a similar drama had been unfolding on Viridia 7. He turned to Xena, seeing her in a new light, not just as a huntress and guardian, but as a key player in a much larger, more dangerous game. "What do we do?" he asked, surprising himself with the use of we. In the short time he had known Xena, he had come to trust her, to feel a connection that transcended their different origins. Xena's amber eyes met his, a mix of determination and something softer, almost vulnerable, shining in their depths. "We run," she said simply. "We hide, and we plan." Without another word, they doused the fire and gathered what few supplies they had. As they melted into the shadows of the jungle, Luke felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. He was no longer just a lost pilot trying to survive. He had become embroiled in a conflict that could shape the future of an entire world. The dense foliage of Viridia 7's jungle became both their shield and their obstacle as Luke and Xena fled deeper into the wilderness. The sound of distant explosions and the ominous hum of warships overhead spurred them on, pushing their bodies to the limit as they navigated the treacherous terrain. Luke's newly acquired knowledge of the jungle, gleaned from days of Xena's patient teaching, now proved invaluable. He found himself instinctively avoiding poisonous plants, recognizing safe paths through seemingly impenetrable thickets, and even identifying sources of water and edible fruits as they ran. As night fell, casting the jungle into an eerie twilight punctuated by bioluminescent flora, Xena finally called for a halt. They had reached a small cave hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines and moss. As they caught their breath, Luke could see the toll the flight had taken on his companion. Despite her strength and stamina, worry lines creased Xena's forehead, and her amber eyes darted constantly, scanning for threats. "We should be safe here for now," Xena said in a low voice, her breathing slowly returning to normal. "Tarek's forces won't risk venturing this deep into the jungle at night. The dangers are too great, even for them." Luke nodded, taking a moment to survey their surroundings. The cave was shallow but dry, offering a decent vantage point of the surrounding area while providing cover. "What's our next move?" he asked, turning back to Xena. She sighed, running a hand through her silver-blue hair. "We need to gather allies. There are other clans, other guardians who do not support Tarek's vision for our people. If we can reach them, unite them, we might have a chance." "But won't Tarek be expecting that?" Luke finished for her. He paused, considering their options. "He'll be watching the usual routes, the places where these other clans might be found." A small, approving smile tugged at Xena's lips. "You think like a tactician." Luke of Earth. "Yes, Tarek will be watching, which is why we must be unpredictable, use paths and methods he won't expect." As they settled in for the night, taking turns to keep watch, Luke found his mind racing. The situation reminded him of historical conflicts on Earth, of guerrilla warfare and resistance movements. He began to formulate strategies, drawing on his military training and the new knowledge he had gained of Viridia 7's terrain and peoples. Part 5. The Resistance. Over the next few days, Luke and Xena moved stealthily through the jungle, always alert for signs of Tarek's forces. They set clever traps using the natural resources around them, pitfalls disguised by leaves, tripwires made from vines that would release a cascade of stinging insects, even using the bioluminescent properties of certain plants to create false trails. Their teamwork grew stronger with each passing day. Luke's off-world perspective combined with Xena's intimate knowledge of the land made them a formidable duo. They communicated with subtle gestures and meaningful looks, developing a silent language all their own. During brief moments of respite, hidden in the hollows of giant trees or camouflaged in fields of towering ferns, Xena shared more about the conflict that had brought them to this point. "Tarek has always been ambitious, she explained one evening, her voice barely above a whisper as they huddled in the shadow of a massive mushroom-like growth. But it was more than that. He saw strength only in terms of brute force, of domination. Luke listened intently, watching the play of emotions across Xena's face as she spoke. "And your father didn't agree?" he prompted gently. Xena shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. "No. My father, he understood that true strength comes from harmony with the land, from wisdom and compassion. He taught me to be a guardian, not just a ruler, to protect and nurture, not to dominate. That's why he chose you to succeed him," Luke realized aloud. Xena nodded. "And why Tarek hates me so much. In his eyes, I am weak, an obstacle to his vision of a powerful, conquering empire." Luke's hand found Xena's in the darkness, squeezing gently. "He's wrong," he said firmly. "What I've seen of you, of your connection to this land and its people, that's real strength. That's the kind of leadership that builds lasting peace." Xena's amber eyes met his, shining with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something that made Luke's heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she whispered. Sometimes I doubt, but hearing you say that." Their moment of connection was abruptly shattered by the sound of approaching vehicles, the whine of anti-gravity engines cutting through the usual nighttime chorus of the jungle. In an instant, they were both on high alert, gathering their meager supplies and preparing to move. As they slipped away into the night, Luke's mind was working overtime. They had been evading Tarek's forces for days, but they couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they would have to make a stand. The question was how, and with what resources. An idea began to form in Luke's mind, sparked by his earlier reflections on Earth's history of conflict and resistance. He turned to Xena as they moved silently through the underbrush. "I think I have a plan," he whispered, "but it's risky, and it will require us to do something that might seem counterintuitive." Xena raised an eyebrow, curiosity overriding her caution for a moment. "I'm listening." Luke took a deep breath. "Instead of just running and hiding, we need to strike back, hit Tarek where he least expects it, using the jungle itself as our weapon." As Luke outlined his plan, he saw a spark of hope ignite in Xena's eyes. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also their best chance of turning the tide. As the twin moons of Iridia 7 rose high in the sky, a new phase of their resistance began to take shape. Part 6. Guerrilla Tactics. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as Luke and Xena put their plan into action. They moved with purpose now, no longer just fleeing, but actively working to undermine Tarek's operations. Luke's off-world tactical knowledge combined with Xena's intimate understanding of the jungle created a potent strategy. They started small, using the jungle's natural hazards to their advantage. Luke showed Xena how to create simple but effective booby traps using vines and the weight of falling branches. They sabotaged Tarek's supply lines, using Luke's knowledge of machinery to disable anti-gravity vehicles when they found them unattended. But their most effective weapon was information. Xena's network of forest creatures, birds, small mammals, and even insects, became their eyes and ears. She could communicate with them in ways Luke couldn't begin to understand, gathering intelligence on Tarek's movements and the location of his forces. As they worked, Luke found himself in awe of Xena's abilities. Her connection to the jungle went beyond mere familiarity. It was as if she and the forest were one entity, working in perfect harmony. He watched as she communicated with a flock of iridescent bird-like creatures, their trilling calls conveying complex information that she somehow understood. "They say Tarek's main force is camped near the Great Falls," Xena reported after one such exchange. "He's gathering his war chiefs there, preparing for a push deeper into the heartlands." Luke nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "That gives us an opportunity. If we can disrupt his gathering, maybe sow some chaos, we can buy more time to rally the other clans." Xena's amber eyes glinted with determination. Yes. Their guerrilla tactics began to pay off. Reports reached them of growing frustration among Tariq's forces, supply shortages, equipment failures, and the constant, unseen threat of the jungle were taking their toll. Morale was low, and whispers of dissent were beginning to spread. But with each small victory came increased danger. Tariq's searches became more aggressive, more desperate. Luke and Xena had several close calls, barely escaping detection on more than one occasion. The strain began to show on both of them, dark circles under their eyes, bodies taut with constant tension. One night, as they huddled in the hollow of a massive tree, listening to the sounds of a search party passing nearby, Luke found himself studying Xena's face in the dim bioluminescent light. Despite the exhaustion evident in the set of her shoulders, there was a fire in her eyes that refused to be extinguished. "How do you do it?" he whispered once the danger had passed. "How do you keep going, knowing what's at stake?" Xena turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "I have to," she said simply. "This land, these people, they're a part of me. To give up would be to lose a piece of myself." Luke nodded, understanding all too well the weight of responsibility. He thought of Earth, of the conflicts that had shaped his own world's history. "On my planet," he began hesitantly, "we have a saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." A small smile tugged at Xena's lips. "Your people are wise sometimes," she teased gently. Then, more seriously, "But you're right. We can't stand idly by while Tariq destroys everything my father, everything our people have built." As they lapsed into companionable silence, Luke found himself marveling at the strange turns his life had taken, from a simple pilot to a crash survivor, and now a key player in an alien world's struggle for freedom. And through it all, Xena had become more than just an ally. She was his anchor in this strange new reality. Their moment of reflection was interrupted by a familiar trilling call. Xena's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she listened to the message carried on the night air. "What is it?" Luke asked, instantly alert. Xena's expression was a mixture of hope and apprehension. "The elders of the southern clans," she breathed. "They've agreed to meet with us. They're gathering at the sacred grove, 2 days' journey from here." Luke felt a surge of excitement. This was the break they had been waiting for. If they could convince the southern clans to join their cause, they might finally have the numbers to stand against Tariq's forces. "When do we leave?" he asked, already reaching for his makeshift pack. Xena's hand on his arm stopped him. Her touch was gentle, but there was an intensity in her gaze that made Luke's breath catch in his throat. "Luke," she said softly, "this journey, it will be dangerous. More dangerous than anything we've faced so far. The path to the sacred grove is treacherous, and Tariq's forces will be watching. You don't have to come. This isn't your fight." For a moment, Luke was stunned into silence. The thought of leaving Xena, of not seeing this through to the end, had never even occurred to him. He covered her hand with his own, meeting her gaze steadily. "Xena," he said, his voice low and determined, "maybe I didn't choose this fight, but I'm a part of it now. I'm not going anywhere." The relief and gratitude that flooded Xena's face made Luke's heart swell. She nodded once, a wordless understanding passing between them. Then, with renewed purpose, they began to prepare for the journey ahead. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the dense canopy, Luke and Xena set out toward the sacred grove, and toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of Viridia 7. The jungle seemed to sense the gravity of their mission, the very air thrumming with anticipation as they moved silently through the underbrush, each step bringing them closer to their destiny. Part 7. The Sacred Grove. The journey to the sacred grove was every bit as perilous as Xena had warned. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, with razor-sharp rock formations jutting out of the earth and deep chasms that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Carnivorous plants with lightning-fast tendrils lay in wait, camouflaged among more benign flora. Even the air itself became a hazard in certain areas, filled with spores that could induce hallucinations or paralysis if inhaled. Luke found himself relying heavily on Xena's expertise, following her lead as she navigated the dangers with an almost preternatural sense of the land. She showed him how to recognize the subtle signs of lurking predators, how to distinguish between poisonous fruits and their edible lookalikes, and how to move with the rhythms of the jungle to avoid detection. As they traveled, Xena shared more about the significance of their destination. The sacred grove is the heart of Viridia 7, she explained as they paused to rest near a bubbling spring. It's said to be the place where the first of our kind awakened, where we learned to commune with the spirit of the planet itself. Luke listened, fascinated by the mix of history and mythology in Xena's words. And the elders of the southern clans, who are they exactly? Xena's expression grew solemn. They are the wisest and most respected leaders among our people, keepers of ancient knowledge, mediators in disputes between clans. Their word carries immense weight. If we can convince them to stand against Tarek, we might have a real chance of stopping him. Luke finished, understanding the gravity of their mission. As they neared their destination, signs of Tarek's influence became more evident. They passed through villages that had been abandoned, their inhabitants fleeing deeper into the jungle to escape Tarek's advancing forces. In one clearing, they found the charred remains of a settlement, the acrid smell of burnt vegetation still lingering in the air. The sight filled Luke with a mixture of anger and determination. This senseless destruction, this disregard for the delicate balance of life on Viridia 7. It was all too reminiscent of the worst aspects of humanity's own history. He found himself more committed than ever to helping Xena stop her brother's mad quest for power. On the evening of the second day, as the twin suns of Viridia 7 began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of purple and orange, Xena suddenly halted, her body tensed, head tilted as if listening to something beyond the range of Luke's hearing. "We're close," she whispered, her amber eyes scanning the dense foliage around them. "The grove is just beyond that ridge," but Luke felt it too,